Picture this. The year is 1660. The grand halls of the Palace of Versailles gleam under the soft glow of countless candles. Mirrors reflect gilded ceilings, polished floors, and courtiers dressed in silks, powdered wigs, and jeweled shoes. Yet among this spectacle of wealth and ceremony, a man moves differently. He is Philippe of France, known to the world as the younger brother of King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself. To his peers, he is a prince of wit and charm, the monsieur of the court. But behind the fanfare and laughter, behind the velvet and pearls, Philippe harbors a secret life, one that defies every expectation of masculinity in 17th-century France. In the privacy of his chambers, Philippe stands before a gilded mirror. Silken robes cascade down his shoulders. His hair is powdered and curled, his cheeks dusted with rouge, a delicate handkerchief resting in one gloved hand. In this room, he is no longer the reserved prince the court knows. He is the woman he has always allowed himself to become in secret. The corridors of Versailles whisper with gossip. A brother too soft, a man too refined, a prince who wears the guise of a lady as easily as he does his own title. And yet, behind the laughter and scandal, Philippe exists in the rarest of freedoms, a freedom the Sun King himself could not give him, and a freedom that will forever define the man, the brother, the tragic Prince of France. Even kings hide secrets behind the crown. From the glittering salons of Paris to the hidden chambers of Versailles, Philippe's journey is a paradox of power and private desire, a prince of France who dared to live like a woman, and whose story remains a testament to identity, courage, and the cost of authenticity. Philippe of France was born in 1640, the second son of Louis XIII and Anne of Austria. From the outset, his life was framed by expectation. His elder brother, Louis XIV, was groomed to embody the grandeur and rigidity of the French monarchy, destined to rule with iron and charisma. Philippe, in contrast, was born into shadows, a prince who would live in comparison to a brother whose brilliance outshone the sun. Yet even in his earliest years, Philippe displayed a sensitivity that distinguished him from other boys of the court. While his peers were trained in swordsmanship and military strategy, Philippe lingered in the salons, fascinated by music, dance, and the subtle intricacies of fashion. He admired the fine fabrics of his mother's gowns, watched the ladies-in-waiting braid hair, and marveled at the delicate choreography of courtly life. Not all princes are born to wield a sword. As Philippe grew, this sensitivity evolved into deliberate self-expression. He experimented with clothing, ornamentation, and even gestures that blurred the lines of gender. Courtiers whispered in corridors, servants marveled at his grace. Yet to Philippe, these were not merely whims. They were moments of authenticity, rare and precious in a world that demanded conformity and stoicism. Even his mother, Anne of Austria, recognized his delicate nature. While she ruled with pragmatism, she quietly allowed him the freedom to explore his tastes and his identity. It was a subtle gift, but one that would shape the prince's secret life, giving him the courage to embrace a persona that would shock, fascinate, and scandalize all of France. These early years of exploration, safety, and secrecy laid the foundation for a lifetime of private rebellion, a life hidden in silk and shadows. By the 1650s, Philippe had reached adolescence, and Versailles was already a stage for the grand theater of the Sun King. Louis XIV, his older brother, radiated authority and command. Every gesture, every smile, every decree was scrutinized and immortalized by the court. And Philippe, delicate, witty, and flamboyant, found himself cast in a role of shadow and reflection, forever measured against the brilliance of the king. Yet Philippe did not merely fade. He learned to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of Versailles with cunning and charm, earning a place of influence in a world that had no patience for deviation. He was witty in conversation, precise in movement, and careful in display, a master of subtle power. He discovered early that influence could be exercised without brute force. A well-timed compliment, a private jest, a hidden gift. In a court obsessed with appearances, Philippe's grace became both armor and weapon. Charm can conceal more than it reveals. It was during this period that Philippe began to cultivate the private life that would define him. Behind closed doors, he surrounded himself with companions who shared his tastes for beauty, elegance, and secrecy. They were musicians, poets, and courtiers who understood that the prince's femininity was not a performance, but an essential expression of self. The rooms of Versailles became private theaters where Philippe could shed the rigid expectations of masculinity and embrace a persona of soft elegance, adorned in silks, powders, and delicate jewelry. Outside these rooms, whispers followed him like shadows. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones of Monsieur, the brother who loved perfume more than politics, who preferred the company of beautiful young men to the battlefield. Rumors swirled of the prince wearing gowns beneath his coats, of subtle gestures and phrases that hinted at a private identity far removed from the stoic image of royalty. These whispers would become the first threads of scandal that would entwine Philippe's life. Yet the prince moved through the court with a careful balance. He was never openly defiant, never reckless. His flamboyance was concealed within the framework of wit and charm. In salons filled with music and candlelight, he delighted, enthralled, and amused, maintaining a delicate dance between discretion and display. His intelligence and humor allowed him to survive in a world that could be cruel to those who dared to exist outside convention. Philippe's rise at court was not merely a story of privilege, it was a delicate performance, a constant negotiation between desire and survival, between authenticity and the ruthless gaze of power. Behind the gilded doors of Versailles, Philippe's life unfolded in secret, like a delicate drama hidden from the eyes of the world. In the grand salons, he was a prince, charming, witty, and polished, yet behind closed doors, he transformed entirely. Silks draped over his shoulders, lace kissed his wrists, and subtle powders highlighted the contours of his face. Jewelry glinted in the candlelight, a silent language of beauty and self-expression that spoke louder than words ever could. He surrounded himself with courtiers, artists, and musicians who understood the fragility of his inner world. These were not mere companions, but confidants, people who could navigate the unspoken rules of identity and secrecy, who could witness him as he truly was without judgment. Here, gender norms dissolved, the rigid hierarchy of Versailles softened, and Philippe became both king and artist in his own private theater. In the quiet, the self can breathe. Even in this sanctuary, the stakes were high. The palace walls carried whispers like echoes in a cavern, and every delicate choice, a gown, a perfumed scent, a gesture, could be twisted into scandal if it reached the wrong ears. Philippe understood this better than anyone. His elegance was not merely indulgence, it was armor. Each movement, each flourish of fabric, was rehearsed, deliberate, a shield against a world that demanded conformity and punished difference. Yet for all the caution, there was joy. He laughed freely here, a sound rare in the cold corridors of court. He danced in silks and lace, played the harpsichord, and composed letters scented with roses to those he trusted most. This private life, far from the scrutiny of his brother's eyes or the court's gossip, was a realm of artistry and freedom, a world where identity could be claimed rather than performed. Philippe's private life was not a rebellion for spectacle, it was a sanctuary, a work of art, a statement of survival. In silence, he shaped his truth, even when the kingdom demanded he wear a mask. Within the gilded walls of Versailles, Philippe's private world was not only one of beauty, but also of desire, a realm where intimacy and secrecy intertwined in a dangerous dance. Courtiers whispered behind fans and gilded doors, observing the subtle alliances, the lingering touches, the letters scented with roses. Every glance, every carefully chosen companion, carried weight. In the public eye, he was the Duke of Orleans, the king's brother, charming, dutiful, polished. In private, he was a prince who lived according to his own truth, unbound by the rigid expectations of masculinity imposed upon him since childhood. His relationships were both sanctuary and risk. He surrounded himself with confidants who could navigate the delicate lines of courtly intrigue, while honoring his secrets. Among these trusted few, he allowed himself the freedom to express love in its most authentic forms, to write poetry, to compose music, to offer attention and affection without fear of reprisal. Yet in a court built on appearances, these acts were perilous. Rumor could ignite faster than the finest candelabras, and the wrong whisper could turn devotion into scandal, intimacy into threat. In desire lies freedom, and peril. Philippe's love was not a mere indulgence, but a defiance of expectation. While the rest of the court engaged in strategic marriages and political alliances, he cultivated bonds that honored his heart and identity. Some of these relationships were fleeting, like delicate threads of silk slipping through one's fingers. Others endured, forming a quiet web of loyalty and understanding. Each encounter was a careful performance, not of self-concealment, but of survival. Even as he explored the boundaries of love, the shadows of danger loomed. Jealousy, envy, and political calculation were never far behind. The courtiers, ever watchful, dissected his gestures and letters for hints of impropriety. The palace became a stage for silent battles, where every smile or compliment could be weaponized against him. Yet Philippe moved through this peril with grace, using intelligence, charm, and the subtle authority of a man who had long learned that survival required both discretion and courage. Love, in Philippe's life, was never simple. It was a careful negotiation between desire and danger, between the freedom of private truth and the constant threat of public condemnation. And in these stolen moments, amidst laughter, music, and the scent of roses, Philippe glimpsed what freedom could be, a fleeting, fragile liberty that belonged entirely to himself. It was here, in the quiet and intimacy of hidden chambers, that the prince's spirit found its wings, however briefly, before the relentless gaze of Versailles closed in once more. Versailles was a palace of light and shadow, of grandeur and scrutiny. Every corridor gleamed with marble, every chandelier reflected 1,000 candles, and every whispered conversation carried the weight of scrutiny. In this gilded labyrinth, Philippe moved like both king and outcast, a man whose public persona demanded admiration, while his private life invited curiosity, gossip, and inevitably danger. Courtiers watched him with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. His elegance, his laughter, the subtle curl of his hair, the graceful tilt of his hand, all were dissected with meticulous attention. Every gesture, no matter how innocuous, became a statement, a possible scandal. In a court where appearances governed power, Philippe's existence was a paradox. He was both adored and feared, envied and maligned, celebrated and whispered about. Every eye is a mirror, every whisper a blade. Yet Philippe did not shrink. He navigated this world with a careful blend of charm and strategy. He smiled, bowed, and conversed with precision, allowing the court to see only what he wished. But beneath the silk and lace, a mind constantly calculated, a heart constantly yearned for authenticity. He had learned early that in a palace where secrets could destroy, discretion was survival. Despite the constant surveillance, Philippe's private life flourished in hidden corners. He maintained relationships with trusted confidants, offering loyalty, tenderness, and understanding in a world that often demanded masks. These secret bonds became his sanctuary, a place where his spirit could breathe. But even sanctuary came with risk. Letters could be intercepted, casual remarks twisted into accusation, and the eyes of Versailles were never truly blind. In the Palace of Mirrors, Philippe's freedom existed only in fragments, small, fleeting, but fiercely cherished. Over time, the tension between the public and private aspects of his life intensified. His elegance, once admired, became a source of ridicule to the envious. His affection, once unseen, became fodder for rumor. And in a court where alliances shifted like the wind, even the most loyal confidants could become instruments of betrayal. Philippe's genius lay in his subtle mastery of the court's gaze. He understood the delicate dance between performance and authenticity, between visibility and secrecy. By cultivating charm and intelligence, he diverted suspicion, creating an intricate theater in which he could exist safely, even if only partially. And yet, the shadows of danger were never far. Each smile, each gesture, each carefully chosen word carried the potential to unravel the delicate tapestry of his life. The palace watches, but the soul endures. Through it all, Philippe remained true to himself, a prince navigating a world designed to suppress difference, a man weaving elegance, cunning, and secrecy into a life that defied conformity. His story was not only of love and beauty, but of survival in a court that both revered and feared him. And it is this tension, between admiration and scrutiny, affection and peril, that defined the true tragedy of his life. Palace life, with its chandeliers and mirrored walls, had always been a delicate balance of elegance and danger. Yet, for Philippe, the equilibrium began to fracture. Rumors, once whispered behind fans and perfumed gloves, grew louder. Jealous courtiers, envious of his influence, his wit, and his freedom to live as he wished, conspired in shadows. The subtle tolerances of Versailles began to harden into scrutiny, suspicion, and eventually, outright hostility. Every day, the tension tightened like a noose around the prince's world. Allies who had offered solace turned cautious, their smiles tinged with uncertainty. Friends whispered warnings. A word too many, a gesture too graceful, a secret revealed even in jest could unravel the carefully maintained threads of Philippe's life. Yet, in the face of this rising storm, he moved with his characteristic poise, masking fear beneath silk and lace. The walls have ears, and every glance is a verdict. The court, once enchanted by his charm, began to see danger in his elegance. Perfumed banquets, once a stage for celebration, became arenas of judgment. Every bow was measured, every laugh analyzed. Even the king, Philippe's own brother, watched with a mixture of affection and unease, aware that Philippe's defiance of convention threatened the fragile hierarchy of power. In this gilded prison, survival required not only intelligence but a mastery of deception. Yet, in private chambers, Philippe remained unwavering. He retreated into the small sanctuaries that he had carved out, quiet rooms adorned with silks, private gardens where whispers could not reach, and the intimate company of trusted confidants. Here, he was no longer the subject of gossip, the anomaly in a rigid court, or the target of envy. He was simply himself. Every stolen smile, every unguarded laugh, every moment of beauty became a quiet rebellion against the suffocating world outside. Even as the palace tightened its grip, Philippe's spirit refused to be caged. But the pressure of scrutiny and the weight of expectation exacted a toll. Allies fell to intrigue, friendships fractured under suspicion, and the corridors of power became treacherous. The prince, who had once moved with confidence among the gilded halls, began to feel the invisible walls closing in. Decisions that once seemed playful, an extravagant costume, a carefully chosen companion, a whispered joke, now carried consequences that could threaten life and legacy. And yet, even as the palace itself seemed to conspire against him, Philippe's brilliance shone. He navigated the treacherous waters with intellect, wit, and the quiet courage of one who understood the cost of authenticity in a world that demanded conformity. He became both a master of the court's gaze and a silent observer of its decay, knowing that the very elegance that made him a target was also his shield. Even under siege, the soul can remain untamed. In the grand theatre of Versailles, Philippe's life became a delicate performance of survival, resilience, and quiet defiance. Each day was a reminder that beauty and intelligence, while celebrated, could also provoke envy and danger. And so, the prince who had lived with the courage to embrace his true self now faced the ultimate trial, maintaining authenticity in the face of a court that sought to shatter it. The court watched, whispered, and waited, yet Philippe endured, a fragile flame against the ever-encroaching darkness. In the quiet corners of history, Philippe's life whispers like a soft but insistent echo. A prince who moved through the corridors of Versailles with silk in his step and defiance in his heart, he challenged every expectation placed upon him by birth, by blood, and by society. His story is not one of mere scandal or vanity, it is the tale of a soul negotiating the impossible, the balance between personal truth and the weight of a world that demanded submission. Philippe's legacy is not measured in battles fought, treaties signed, or crowns adorned, but in courage, the quiet, relentless courage to live authentically amid scrutiny, judgment, and danger. He was an anomaly in an era that prized conformity, a figure whose very existence defied the rigid structures of masculinity, religion, and power. In each gown, each gesture, each carefully concealed ritual of self-expression, he carved out a space where identity could breathe, even if only in secret. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Yet his defiance came at a cost. The court, dazzled by his brilliance and elegance, also recoiled from it. Jealousy, misunderstanding, and fear shadowed every smile and compliment. In the glare of power, Philippe's authenticity was a threat, a mirror that reflected the insecurities and hypocrisies of those around him. History, in many ways, has judged him harshly, focusing on extravagance over struggle, on outward expression rather than the inner battle waged daily in silence. Philippe's life reminds us that authenticity has always been dangerous, that visibility invites both admiration and censure, and that the price of self-expression is often social isolation or historical misinterpretation. He dared to live like a woman, to embrace beauty and grace in a society that condemned such freedoms in men, and in doing so, he exposed the fragility of human tolerance. His choices were not frivolous, they were acts of survival, artistry, and rebellion intertwined. Even centuries later, his courage reverberates, challenging our understanding of identity, power, and freedom. As we look back, we see more than the gilded halls and perfumed chambers. We see a man whose life is a study in contrast: public restraint and private freedom, fear and audacity, expectation and authenticity. Philippe was both a product of his era and a rebel against it, a figure whose humanity shines through the layers of historical exaggeration, rumor, and condemnation. History remembers the flamboyant, but it rarely understands the brave. His story poses questions still relevant today. How much of ourselves do we hide to survive in society? How do the expectations of others shape our identity? And what is the cost of refusing to conform, even when the world demands it? Philippe's tragedy is not only in what he endured but in what he revealed, that living authentically has always been an act of courage, often punished by the very society that applauds conformity. Philippe's life is a mirror, showing us the fragile line between survival and surrender, between disguise and truth. Though centuries have passed, the shadow of Philippe lingers in history, inspiring those who struggle to reconcile identity and expectation, freedom and duty, expression and judgment. His courage echoes in the lives of countless individuals who, in their own ways, continue to challenge the boundaries imposed by tradition, culture, or authority. Even in history's shadows, courage leaves a light. Philippe of France lived like a woman, yet his story is not solely about gender or appearance. It is about the enduring human struggle to be seen, understood, and accepted. In a world that often punishes difference, he chose to exist fully, to embrace beauty, and to defy the suffocating expectations of his time. In doing so, he became more than a prince. He became a symbol, a lesson, and a quiet testament to the enduring power of self-expression. In the flicker of candlelight and the echoing halls of Versailles, we are left with the haunting question Philippe faced every day: how much of ourselves will we dare to reveal, when the world is always watching? Centuries have passed since Philippe walked the gilded halls of Versailles, yet his story reverberates like a faint, insistent drumbeat through the corridors of history. His courage, his defiance, and his refusal to conform continue to resonate in the lives of those who struggle with identity, self-expression, and societal expectation. What was once scandalous, hidden behind silk and shadows, now mirrors the battles faced by countless individuals today. Consider the stories of those marginalized for living authentically: the artists who dared to defy gender norms, the activists fighting for LGBTQ+ rights, the voices silenced for refusing to wear the mask society demanded. Philippe's life is reflected in theirs, a reminder that the struggle for authenticity is timeless, and that the cost of self-expression has always been profound. BB. History does not forget those who dared to be different. In modern societies, people still navigate pressures similar to those that haunted Philippe: rigid expectations, judgment, and the fear of exposure. Just as the courtiers of Versailles whispered behind his back, today, social media amplifies scrutiny, and public opinion can crush the most fragile human courage. Yet, as in Philippe's time, moments of beauty, grace, and self-expression shine through, offering hope that authenticity, though costly, endures. Philippe's legacy is a quiet warning and an enduring inspiration, that the pursuit of self, in any era, carries both risk and reward. It reminds us that the societal condemnation of difference is not new, and that each act of living authentically is an echo of those who came before, a whisper from history urging courage in the face of fear. In the shadows of Versailles and the glare of today's world, Philippe's story reminds us that authenticity has always been a rebellion, and bravery has always been lonely. And perhaps, in a more intimate reflection, his life asks us all: how much of our true selves do we hide to survive? How often do we silence the parts of us that the world might not accept? Philippe dared to live fully in private when the public could not tolerate it, and in doing so, he leaves a haunting legacy that continues to challenge, inspire, and provoke reflection. Even centuries later, courage leaves a trace. The echoes of Philippe's life remind us that history is not merely a record of events, it is a living testament to the struggles, triumphs, and resilience of the human spirit. In every act of defiance, in every quiet assertion of identity, the prince in silk and shadows speaks to us still. His story, though long buried in rumor and scandal, whispers a timeless truth: that authenticity, no matter the era, leaves an indelible mark. The past may fade, but its lessons, its warnings, and its inspirations continue to shape the lives of those willing to listen.